I spent all this time and energy looking outward for answers when the answers was right here in me.
We think like we don't really need it.
You're going to leave me.
JR, man, it's so yeah, man, it's so dude, so good to have you, man. So good for you to be here, and it's crazy. You and I were jamming before we hit record, and we actually have a few things in common. Like, so I did a lot of research on you. You were just on my very, very dear friend, my good buddy's podcast, Ryan Mickler, Order of Man.
Yeah.
And I listen. I talk to Ryan every 2 weeks. We've been friends for a decade, and so I heard your show on his, and obviously did my own research. But I was listening to it, and I was like, oh my gosh, we have that in common. Oh my gosh, we have that in common. Oh my gosh, we have that in common. But I'd love to start out, man, with your childhood. I know your mom immigrated here from Central America, correct? And and it was all about your sister and you know, some health concerns and that kind of thing. But I would love for you to start there if you're cool with that.
Yeah, 100%. And man, let me just say first and foremost, just thank you for the opportunity,
Yeah.
to be here with you and to connect. And again, as we said, I've been kind of tuning into a few of the episodes on this pod and really love what you're doing. So,
Thank you.
but essentially, man, it's interesting. I just want to based on what you said regarding, we have a lot more in common. And I think that's what's really great about when you're able to lean in to have conversation. And conversation to me has been redefined. For a long time, I interpreted a conversation to be, hey, Larry's going to speak X amount of time and I'm going to equally have that same amount of time to speak. And I've learned that a conversation can consist, and it's probably even a more powerful conversation, if you speak 80% of the time and I only speak 20, but I spent 80% of the time listening to you. And that is an important, that's something that's incredibly important for all of us, because through that practice is when you find connection, when you find commonality, when you find intersectionality between all of our worlds and the journeys. And there's a reason we're all at a crossroads in this particular moment where we're connected in this space, in this four-way. We're here together looking at each other, having this conversation. So, I have, and I think that's one of the things that drives me so much, because I have had the opportunity over the last 21 years to meet so many people from all over the world that you would never think that I would have anything in common with. And yet I have so much in common with those individuals, and have more in common with those individuals than people you would think that I would, again, I'm a vet, man. You think that I'm going to sit here and have so much in common with every single vet. And that's not true, because at the end of the day, it's not that it's a military person, or it's not that it's an executive, or it's not that it's a person. And people all have their own different things. And that's what makes us unique and cool. But, you won't find that unless you actually lean into it. So anyways, in regards to the childhood, man, I mean, there's a lot of layers there. And people always, like to talk to me about being resilient and resiliency, and come in and talk about, and how did you just develop resiliency after you were injured? And I was like, no, what I realized this a few years after I was injured. And what I identified was that resiliency wasn't something that just suddenly happened. I had been conditioned in it my entire youth. There were scenarios that I was constantly presented with and introduced to, that it was conditioning me to be prepared for this very big thing that was going to happen in my life, and how I was going to be able to navigate that. So I don't necessarily think that it's just something that just no, it has to be conditioned resiliency. And so the reason I say that is because my childhood was challenging. There was a lot of beautiful things, a lot of beautiful memories that I have from my childhood. But at the same time, I cannot overlook the fact that it was challenging, and it presented its own challenges in the sense of, my mother, as you said, immigrated to this country looking for opportunity to help take care of her daughters that were still in Central America and in Salvador. Met my father. My father, dips out when I was 9 months old, and leaves my mother by herself to try to figure this out. And she's doing the best that she can with what she has. And needless to say, it was us. And there's something if you're an outsider looking at my life, you would feel sad for me because you would say, man, it's sad that that kid is being exposed to the things he's being exposed to. Now, what was I being exposed to? Well, I was exposed to the fact that my mother was involved in some abusive relationships. I witnessed that. It was my responsibility to call the cops when he put his hands on her and tell them where we were. And I would hide in the closet until they showed up. Like, I mean, if it wasn't happening in my house, I talk about how it was happening in our apartment complex. It was just sort of the environment that I was in. And somebody said not too long ago how your DNA can be changed by your environment.
Yeah.
And when that person said that to me, it just clicked because not only I was like, well, environment and experiences, right? Like experiences equally. And the reason that resonated with me is because I remember like when I was probably like 5 years old, maybe 6. So Spanish was my first language, even though I was born in Louisiana, it was my first language. And my mom was dating a guy at the time that he would sit in the living room of our apartment and he would play the piano and sing these Spanish love songs. And I just, this was the closest thing of my entire youth that I had is like, that's my dad. Like that was the closest thing I ever had. And so needless to say, I would sit next to him and watch him as he played. And I would start singing these Spanish love songs. And, then he ended up taking me one time to this hole in the wall bar.
Took you to a bar. I heard this story.
In Louisiana.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there playing the piano, and here I am singing and dancing about heartbreak and heartache and how she left me for somebody else. I'm like 5 or 6 years old. I have no clue about this. And all the people who are heavily intoxicated are probably like, yeah, he's the best. But the reason I tell that story, because I forgot it for a long time until this person said about the DNA thing. The reason that story to me is so important, that's who I was born to be. That's who I was born to be. Like I was, and not necessarily like this person that is an entertainer, singer, dancer, more so somebody that just would be this energy in whatever space that I would occupy. This is the type of energy and person that I would be. And there was all these things over the course of my youth that tried to change my DNA. So my mom, abusive relationships, I witnessed a lot of that. We moved around a lot for the first 9 years of living in Louisiana. Then at 9 years old, we moved to Arkansas. I'm in third grade. That's a challenging time for my life because kids are territorial and kids are kids. And so there's a lot of this hazing and a lot of this picking on me because I was one of the first Hispanic kids to show up in that community. The only way I knew to sort of defend myself is to fight. And I found myself suspended from school a lot. 3 days, 5 days, 7 days at a time, doing in school detention. I was just a problematic kid, and I was struggling. And I finally realized, well, this is going to be home, and I got to figure out a way to sort of navigate this. And so, and I did, and I kind of settled in, but it never felt right. It never felt like a home to me. I was missing something. I was craving something, and what we all are craving is to be part of something. Yeah. And it all starts with be part of a community. People, who are those people? Like, what are you part of? And for me, I craved that, and I love my mom and she was there, but at the same time, it was just my mom. And I would look around at my peers and they would have, their dads or their uncles and cousins and siblings, and I just yearned to have that. I wanted that so badly. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean people that have that doesn't mean that, I talked to one of my boys who, his dad was in his life. And he was like, man, my dad he was there. He went to every sporting event. He did this, he did that. He always, I can count on him, but he never told me he loved me. He never gave me a hug. He never said he was proud of me. He never did those things. I knew he did, but he just never said it. So there's different ways to look at things. And so for me, it was a challenging period in my life. And ultimately what ended up happening is I just found myself disconnected from school. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to be part of school. I kept fighting. I kept getting in trouble. And then we moved my junior year of high school to Georgia. And so here we are going to Georgia now, and we moved to Georgia. And so guess what?
Your junior year, right? You said?
No, this is my senior year now.
Senior.
Yeah. So after my junior year, we moved. Yep.
Just real quick, you said, I know, like, so, oh God. there's so much alignment in like, so you were raised just you and your mom, is that correct?
Just my
For a
mom and
while?
I.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
It's just me and my mom. And then same thing, right around 9 and 10, she's looking around at all your friends, being like, they all have dads. I don't. Like, this kind of sucks.
Yeah.
And but moving, you mentioned that when you moved third grade, people can be territorial. People can be, like, and I'm curious. Like, I feel like the high school years can be a flip of a coin, and it could be like people can be insanely accepting because like somebody's different and that kind of thing. And I also get the feeling that the older we are in high school, we become maybe a little bit more accepting. Like I was talking to my two older boys, who's a junior and a senior this year, and I'll just share this with you. My 11-year-old, he has tics, so he kind of has uncontrolled physical movements, and people take notice of that. And so I was having a conversation with my older kids, and I'm like, hey, I was like, I'm really nervous about Lawson going to high school. I feel like kids can be cruel and that kind of thing. And my kids surprisingly said, I think you're actually kind of wrong. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, he'll get more trouble in middle school, but once he gets to high school, you'd be really surprised how accepting everybody is of people's handicaps and disabilities. And I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. He's like, one of my good buddies, he's got this, and this kid's got this. And he's like, we all just go, like, no one points it out. No one makes fun of him. We're not going to do that to somebody. He's like, and that's kind of standard. So, but I look back on my high school years, and the bullies tended to drift a little bit more in that junior, senior year. But when you moved, was that hard for you to fit in? Were people more accepting, or were they
So,
like not at all?
so what's fascinating is, here I am moving, excuse me, moving my senior year of high school. And you obviously are aware, senior year, that's your year, man.
That's
You go
the
out as
year.
top dog, man.
Yeah.
You're the big dog on campus. And here, all I'm doing now is moving, and I'm in this new school, and people think I'm a freshman because they've never seen me before, right? They're
Okay.
like, who
Yeah.
is this dude? Like, is he a freshman? Like, where'd he come from, right? And yet I'm a senior. Um, something I want to share real quick is you know, you asked, so it was just my mother and I, and yes, my mother, I remember, again, I was around 6 years old when my mother had experienced one of those, nights where he put his hands on her. And the next day, after they took him away, the next day, my mom and I are out running errands, and my mom has this big smile on her face, huge smile on her face. And I remember asking her, I was like, why are you smiling so much? Like, I know what happened last night, and it was ugly. And she said something that was pretty profound. She said, I smile to invite the blessings. If I'm not smiling, I'm not able to see and receive the blessings that are coming our way. And of course, at that age, I was like, I don't know what she's talking about. It makes absolutely no sense to me what this woman is talking about. Now, later in life, when I was going through my own adversity, essentially she's like, I'm focusing on what I can control. And and then that was sort of kind of the principle and the way that I sort of, after I was injured, that's the way I kind of like live my life. It's like, you know what, to smile, to invite the blessings. Whatever good is out there, I'm just going to be open and willing to receive it, right? Now, my mom was a hurt woman. My mother had experienced a lot of adversity, a lot of trauma prior to having me. I mean, you name it, unfortunately, my mother has experienced it. My mother, because one, you could say, being a woman, two, being a Latina in the Hispanic culture, we don't talk about anything. And three, because she didn't have the resources to go and talk to somebody. She didn't have the luxury to, I'm going to take an hour out and go talk to somebody, right? That's not the world we come from. So my mother just had to do what she's always had to learn to do, which is survive and just get through. But what I identified in my mother, and as a kid, listen, and this is not a part, it took me a long, 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 long time to get to this point. And part of it was because I'm just a protective kid. Like I'm still, as a 41-year-old man, I'm still that 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kid that just wants to protect his mom. But my mom, I would get in trouble, and my mom would start to discipline me. Now, when you talk to somebody of our era or older, It's like, yeah, remember we make jokes about, remember your mom and your dad would do this and that, your grandparents would do that. And you're like, it was our world. But my mom would take it a step further. And my mom would, when I say like discipline me, she wouldn't just spank me. My mother would like beat me. My mother like it went from like, okay, the funny get a switch, funny get a belt, funny get a, whatever object she can get her hands on, to evolving to where my mother bought like a rope. And my mother would like tie my hands and my feet and let's stand over me, and with the other end of the rope, like hit me. And my instinct was to put my hands up, right, and to cover myself. And the reason she did that is because she didn't want me like trying to get away from her. She needed to discipline me. And I could tell you, being around 10ish, 11ish years old, maybe, and she was disciplining me for something. And I remember laying on my back as my mother's 4'11". I'm sure at 10 years old, I was taller than her, right? Like I could have easily just physically removed her from that, and removed myself. I could have easily. It's my mom. And so I remember I'm laying on my back and she's standing over me and she's hitting me. And I looked into her eyes, man. And I just remember thinking to myself, this has nothing to do with me. This has
Really?
absolutely nothing to do with me. Like what she is doing right now, it's not about me. Like it's not, this is something else. And of course didn't put it together till in my late 20s. And and I would go to school, man, and I would change in gym, or I'd change at football practice, and I would make sure I would go into a corner where no one could see me because I didn't want them to see, the markings on my body. And then of course, there'd be a different problem. I was still in this element. I had to protect my mom, despite I knew what she was doing was not fair to me. And needless to say, um, that's some of the stuff that I navigated. Now, I'm gonna jump out of order a little bit just to sort of close the loop on this, but essentially later in life, when I started to kind of work through a lot of my own trauma, and a lot of it wasn't even related to the stuff that I experienced in the military. A lot of the things that I was struggling with in my 20s after I was injured was my childhood, my relationship with my mother. And I remember thinking to myself, having this moment where I'm like, okay, it was very noble of her to have this sort of perspective of like, I'm going to smile to invite the blessings. But what I've identified is that's a short term fix. That's short term. So you're always going to be doing this, looking for the next thing, right? It's the next thing. It's like no different than like you're in a stream of water that is so strong, a current that is pulling you, and you're just reaching for some object above the water that you can grab onto, that you can just come up for air a little bit and just survive. But you don't have the strength enough to pull yourself actually up and get out of that scenario. You just slip and fall right back into it. You're surviving, looking for the next thing. And I realized that was what I was taught. And although it's noble and it's important because it just keeps you surviving, in order to have sustainability and longevity, what I really needed to do was, instead of just sitting here like submerging all of these emotions and feelings and experiences, I needed to bring them and put them on the table, deal with them. So now when I see blessings come my way, now I can take full advantage of them because I'm in a different space, in a mental space, versus my mother, because she never dealt with it. Blessings would come into her life, but she wasn't able to really appreciate them and take full advantage of them. It's just like, okay, it was great in the moment. Now I got to pivot and look for the next thing. And so, as noble as that is, it taught me that, but it equally taught me, in order to really take advantage of those blessings, you got to be willing to do a lot of that work. So when those blessings do present themselves, you can see it for what it actually is, right? And so there was just and those, listen, that type of discipline continued. It continued. I remember one time my mother was you know, and the man she was seeing at the time, he jumped in and was disciplining me that way. And my uncle came into the room and he said, for God's sake, stop. You're going to kill this boy. And I realized my mom had experienced so much loss. And I was the only consistent thing in her life. The only thing that was consistent. Her biological father left. Her biological mother gave her up for adoption. Like family, just she experienced losses of people that she grew up with. She lost a child. One of my sisters passed away when I was 3 years old. She saw her father when they finally reconnected later in life. She saw him die. She witnessed that. Just relationships, people abandoning her, like you name it. Like she just experienced. I was the only consistent thing. So I'm able to give grace to my mother at this stage of my life because I understand why she was the way she was. She was just afraid of losing something else that she loved so much. So her way to approach that, to not lose it, was to just control it and smother it and hold on to it and not let it breathe in some regards, right? Because she was afraid of what could happen.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I was just going to say, I heard you talk about this on Ryan's show that, she would, the guilt lever was something she loved to pull. That was the exact same with me
And
as
still
well.
did.
Yeah.
And still did until my 20s. Once I started getting, to relationships and things like that, oh boy, it was there. And because her mindset was like, you're going to leave me. This new opportunity, this new chapter, whether it be in a relationship, whether it be a job opportunity, it's going to take you somewhere away from me. I'm going to lose you. You are not coming back. And it was like, Mom, like that's not how this works, right? And so that's a lot of the stuff that I had to like learn to overcome. So get back to your question, which seemed like 20 minutes ago, in regards to moving to Georgia and how difficult that was. It was difficult, but you know what? Because I had done it already, I went into, so let me tell you how sort of confident and to some degree seamless it was for me. So I get there, it's before the school year starts. I ask about the football team. They're like, yeah, you can call this coach. He's the head coach. Here's his number. I call the head coach. I'm like, man, I'd love to come and, be on the team. And he says, well, we don't take walk-on starters. Like, that's not, we're good. And I was like, I understand. Just give me a chance. And he was like, okay. So he invites me out to the tryout. And dude, I'm out there. I don't know anybody and nobody knows me. And I didn't know who was the superstar, who wasn't. I didn't know any of that. And I would see guys put their heads down after, maybe not doing a drill as the way they wanted or whatever. And these dudes would put their heads down. I'd come up behind them and slap them on the ass. Like, come on, man. You're good. You got this. Slap them on the helmet. I'm slapping all these people. Like, let's go. You're good. And all these dudes are looking at me like, who is this dude? Like, where'd this dude come from? And it was just my nature. That's my DNA. And so afterwards, the coach calls me to this office and he's like, hey, man, you made the team. And I was like, how did I make the team? Like, I just had surgery on my ankle. So I was kind of limping a little bit. I was like, I'm not 100%. He says, you made the team because of your attitude. And I
Yeah,
was like,
man.
the hell is that?
There you go.
What does that mean? I'm a 17-year-old kid. I'm like, I don't care about an attitude. All I care about what number am I going to be? What position am I going to play? And it's going to help me with the ladies. That's all I care about, right? That's all I don't know about this attitude stuff. But that it like all the stuff that I had experienced, as difficult as it was, prepared me for that moment, prepared me to show up that way, and prepared me instead of to try to recoil back to the back of the room or to the back of the drills and not speak to anybody. Instead, it prepared me and invited me to just step up to the front and be that leader and be that person and be that voice and be that example. And my senior year was the best year of my high school years, but I only went there 1 year. It was the best years because yes, I was on a football team. I had a great community of people. Like it was different. It was different. And when you talk about in any organization, whether it's an organization of, you and I growing up, just an organization of us and our moms, an organization of you and your family now, me, my wife, and our two kids, or an organization of a military or unit, or an organization of a big corporation, a team. All of it's an organization. And in order to, you can tell people they matter, you can tell people they belong, you can tell people you value them, you can tell them all those things. But if they do not feel it, if they do not feel it, it does not matter what you were saying. It doesn't matter. You can tell them all day long. They will not buy into it. And so you have to create a culture where people feel that way. And they don't even know what they're feeling. They can't even describe it. They don't know where it comes from, but they know the feeling and they like it. And when I was in Georgia, it was such an incredible feeling that I had of a community of people that embraced me and showed me so much love. And it just changed me and slowly was getting me back to my original DNA. And then life decided, well, we weren't done with you. We have a little bit more trauma we were going to expose you to. So just hold on for, another year or so, and then we'll expose you to that, which is when I joined the military after high school.
Yeah, and you joined the military because part of who you are as a person is you're a person of service. As you identify, you want to give back, right? So
Yeah.
and I know for you this happened, the typical way of like I think a high school kid, which you had a conversation with a recruiter, everything sounded like a really fantastic idea, right? And then you joined the military.
Yeah, I joined the Army. It's actually even more cliche than that, man. I just saw a commercial. I saw a commercial on TV. And, back then the Army slogan was be all you can be. And so here I am, buying into, being all that I could be, and, I had a different perspective, man, compared to a lot of my peers when I was in senior in high school. So again, as we stated, my mother was an immigrant. My mother, you know, um, we didn't have a lot growing up. My mother made no more than $40,000 a year. And I knew that we didn't have a lot. I knew that, I knew we were struggling. I got that. My mom did the best that she could, and I still had gaming systems. I still had cool shoes. I still, now granted, I still had the shoes. I got them 3 months later because, paying every other week in layaway, but eventually you got it. And when you got it, boy, I rock those things as if
Yeah,
they just
man.
came out,
You
you
really
know?
appreciate him.
Oh, 100%. But I also appreciate it because I went to El Salvador a lot of times as a kid to visit my family. And where my family lives in El Salvador, it's not the city. They are in the fields.
Yeah, you said
Their
like on the
house,
side of like a mountain, right?
mountain,
No running
dude,
water, no bathroom
no,
inside, right?
none,
Yeah,
no
man.
electricity, no lights, no nothing. But there was something about that. Like I still have nostalgic moments. Like I love coffee. And I can tell you there's times that I could pick up a cup of coffee and drink it. And I remember being 9, 10, 11, 12, up at 5:30 in the morning because that's when everybody got up because that's when the sun, that's when you would hear the roosters. Like everybody gets up at that time. And everyone goes to bed when the sun goes down. Like that's your clock. And I remember sitting there and can I have some coffee? And I would sit there with my grandmother and my mom and uncles and just sip coffee with them, just black coffee. But what that did, those experiences, what it did is it gave me a deeper appreciation for what I did have in this country. And so when 9/11 took place, like so many people, I was one of those that was like, yo, like all these blessings that my mother and I and my family in El Salvador have been able to experience, like it's being threatened. And so I got to do something. And so the military was an opportunity for me to serve, give back, go to college, get money for college, travel, see the world, maybe get a little bit more discipline in my life. It was a one-stop shop for me. It truly was. And, you know, I joined as an 11 Bravo as an infantryman. I go off to basic training. I'm there for 3 months. I get assigned to my unit in January. I joined in September. I'm assigned to my unit in January. March, I'm deployed. And April, life changes. I mean, it's like that's how quick everything happened for me. And I really believe that I was never, as much as I had had these thoughts and ambitions to want to stay in the military for 20 years and to have this sort of lucrative career, I identified that my journey was never for me to be in the military 20 years. The military was going to be an avenue to get me to back to who I was always destined to be, and I was going to find myself through that experience. That's the way I see it.
Yeah. So that, and then, like you said, April 5th, 2003, you know, this whole thing goes down, right?
Yeah. So I'm
And take,
driving a Go
yeah,
ahead.
take us to that.
So I'm driving a Humvee through a city called Karbala, and it's a routine day, man. Routine mission, routine stuff. And I remember that we're driving. We get to our first destination, and then they're like, "Okay, now we got to go and meet up, go to this other location to secure this area." So we pull over. We get out of our Humvees. We're looking how on the route that we're going to take, looking for the route we're going to take. We finally decide this is the route we're going to take, and we start moving in that direction. And the front left tire of the Humvee that I was driving ran over a roadside bomb, and immediately 3 other troops were thrown out of the vehicle. Um, I was trapped inside. They all walked away with minor physical injuries. I mean, literally, I mean, this is obviously combat in 2003. So, one guy had shrapnel like in his hand. And I remember they said they pulled it out there. And guess what? He was back with the unit like in a couple of hours. One guy had shrapnel like in his lip and his face. And they took it out there, patched him up and said, "You're back with the unit within a couple of hours." The gunner was actually medevaced back because he was thrown up in the air, and when he landed, he injured his leg, so he had to come back. But like 8 weeks later, once he healed, he was back with the unit. Me, on the other hand, I was trapped inside, and this Humvee is now engulfed in flames. Now, for a very long time, when people would ask me about what happened, I would always talk about the fear and the trauma that I experienced in those 5 minutes, the thoughts of like I was going to die. I'm afraid I'm going to die in this way at this age. But because I've done so much work and because I'd love to practice this space of like stillness, like I love to just be still, like not having to be, go for a walk and not having to have a podcast or schedule a call or listen to music. Just like go on a walk, have nothing in my ears except just my own thoughts. I love to just sit. I love to just close my eyes, and I love to just feel myself breathe. And the reason that's so important to me because I was reminded, I started doing yoga again. I've done it off and on, just all right, cool. I'll go with the girlfriend and do a class here and just to appease her or whatever. And but there was a period where I was like, no, I love this, man. This is great. This is good for me. And then I got busy in life or whatever, and I've recently started getting back into it a few years ago. And I remember someone who has so many goals and someone who feels like they're driven and understands what they want out of life. I remember every time I would start this class, the instructor would say, "Okay, close your eyes, feel that breath, connect with that breath." And then she would ask, "What's your intention? What's your intention for the next 60 minutes? What's your intention?" And I'm like, it would make me panic. I don't have an intention. I got to have an intention. Like, what's a phrase? What's a word that you want to constantly say to yourself over the course of these 60 minutes? I don't have a word. I don't have a phrase. And I just had to like eliminate that stress and everything and just kind of go back to the basics. And I was like, for me, I'm just going to be present. Like that's what it is for me. Some people say I am strong. Some people say I am capable. Some people say I am whatever. That's fine. For me, it was more like I'm just going to be present. And part of that being present is feeling that breath. So now go back to the 5th of April of 2003. I'm in this Humvee, and there were several instances where my eyes would get heavy and my eyes would close. Now, when my eyes would close, it's really funny how this works, man. When my eyes were closed, I didn't feel any pain. I didn't hear the chaos that was happening around my Humvee. I couldn't even really feel the gasping when I was gasping for air. The only two things that were present when my eyes were closed was the fact that I can actually feel myself breathing and my thoughts. There was no pain. There was none of the chaos. There was none of the fear, nothing else. Those are the only two things that existed. But then I would tell myself, I can't keep my eyes closed. I got to open my eyes. I got to continue to fight and hang on as much as I can. And sure enough, 5 minutes later, they pulled me out. Why is that so important? Because all of us find ourselves at some point in life, right? We're all in some sort of the analogy of burning Humvee, a situation where you feel trapped and you feel like you're in pain and you feel like you're suffering and you feel afraid and all these things. And in the midst of all that stuff, and it doesn't even have to be so traumatic like that. It could simply be like, I got two kids. Life is great for me. I got two kids. I got a wife. I got two dogs. Like sometimes it's like between work, between driving my one daughter to her softball lesson, driving her to a tournament I coach her to, then spending time with my son, spending time with my wife, and then also I got to do work, and it's overwhelming. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. So when that shit happens, guess what I do? I find a moment. It doesn't have to be long. I'll find 5 moments, 5 minutes, and I'll just close my eyes and I just connect with my breath and I connect with my thoughts. And that's how I get through the storm. That's sort of my sort of meditative practice, if you will. And so sure enough, 5 minutes later, I was pulled out of the Humvee, started the medevac process. I ended up in San Antonio, Texas. And that's where the road to recovery began. And in many ways, I fought it alone, man. Like I didn't have the guys in my unit. And I'll just tell this story real quick. I mean, my guys in my unit never reached out to me. Never. And yet I was fed this narrative that we're a brotherhood. We look after one another. We're, taking care of one another, and yet I would go around and visit these other patients and they would be like, oh, hey, JR, let me introduce you to my squad leader. Hey, let me introduce you to my commander. Hey, let me introduce you to my first sergeant. Let me introduce you to my battle buddy, and I'm like, oh, nice to meet you guys. And they're like, yeah, we just got back, a couple of weeks ago from, deployment. And we just wanted to come in for a couple of days and just check on our guy or our girl. And I'm looking around. I'm like, where are my boys?
Yeah.
Where are my boys?
Where were they?
Man, they're out there living their life. They were out there living their life. Now, here's what I would say. I mean, before people start getting angry, because I know people hear that and they're like, who are those people, JR? We're going to find them. No. Listen, what I later realized because I did connect with them, what I later realized is those guys, the reason they never reached out is because they were afraid. They didn't know what to say. And so they just felt it was easier to remove themselves. What I later realized is that those guys, as much as I was thriving and healthy and alive and doing well, the reason why they removed themselves because seeing me in the way that they were seeing me was just a trigger for them. It was too much of a reminder of the 5th of April of 2003 when all of them can hear me screaming and yelling inside of that Humvee. And so it was traumatic for them. And for a long time, I just thought that they just didn't give a shit. I thought that they didn't care. I thought, what jerks? And I realized, oh no, I was able to have some grace and have some a compassion for where they're at, right? But I still had to navigate it by myself. I mean, that doesn't take away that fact that I still had to do it by myself. And so one of the things that obviously I might have said this on Ryan's, I'll definitely say it here. I say it a lot of times is, when I started visiting patients, man, I was 20 years old. It was 6 months after I was injured. What do you think a 20-year-old can really say to anybody to help them? I had some experiences, but I didn't even know what to say to people. And the thing was, there's another great book called Stop Walking on Eggshells. I read that book in my 20s, and there was a lot of eye-opening things there. And I was able to identify that I did that a lot in my youth. My mother, when I came home from school, walked into the house at any point, I always had to walk on eggshells. Like, is she in a good mood? Is she not? If she wasn't in a good mood, it was my job to make her happy, which is part of the reason for a very long time when there was a situation where somebody was emotional or sad or stressed, what was my coping mechanism? I would make a joke. I got to make you laugh. I got to make you smile because that's what I had to learn how to do with my mom. But I nonetheless still had to walk on eggshells. And I remember when I was asked to visit a patient in the hospital, I remember walking into that patient's room and dude, it felt heavy in that room. And I was like, I want nothing more than just turn around and run the hell out of here. I don't want to be in this room. I don't want to be in this space because all it was doing was reminding me of that feeling when I was a kid. And I was like, I don't want to be here. I want to get the hell out of here. And I started walking into these rooms. And what I realized is that I didn't have all the answers. I didn't have all the right sound bites, the right phrases, the right things to say. But I was willing to put myself in a space where we could figure it out together. And I think that that's what people need to really understand. We're so conditioned that we got to have answers, we got to have solutions. And you got to realize that if you don't have them, just put yourself in the space and be open and look around and pay attention and listen. This space will give you what you need. And through those visits over a few months, I started, oh, wait a minute, I could serve again. I love this feeling. Okay, they told me I can't stay in the army, but you know what? I could do this. This is incredible. Oh, wait, people are telling me I have a story. And people are telling me I'm a good communicator. People are sharing all these things. I'm listening to people. I'm now leaning into when someone said, hey, come speak at this event. Oh, okay. I mean, I don't want to. No, you should do it. Okay, I'll do it. Oh, wait, you're good at this. What? I am? Okay, let me lean into that a little bit. Hey, you should get involved with a nonprofit to help service members and be an advocate. You think I should? Do I bring value? I don't know anything about business. I don't know anything about fundraising. No. You're a great communicator. Okay, I'll try it. All of a sudden now I'm one of the faces of the organization at a 21-year-old kid. Then I get into the speaking circuit where I'm like, this is what I really want to do with my life. And I'm out there paying attention to that. I've always paid attention, man. Even the acting, the entertainment stuff that presented itself. Like from an acting standpoint, my best friend was like, dude, here's an opportunity. You should do it. You really think so? Dude, you should. Okay, fine. I'll try out.
What
I got it.
opportunity was he talking about?
All my children.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Was
got on all my children.
that was the exact money? Because I know you're on that, but like, is that the one he was talking about?
Yep, that was the one. My
Awesome.
boy was like, hey, dude, you should audition for this role, for this part. And I was like, what are you talking about, man? I'm not an actor. I don't want to be an actor. I have no aspirations to be an actor. And he's like, nah, man. I was like, fine. Okay, I'll try it. And then here's the funny thing. I get the job. I'm supposed to be on for 3 months. I ended up being on for 3 years. But I remember about a year later, I was on the show and we ended up doing like this fan event. And here I am, sitting on this stage with all the daytime, all my children legends, right? The greats, the Susan Lucci's, and all the fans are there, and they're like, I gotta ask a question to Susan and to Michael Knight and to all these big soap
Michael
actors.
Knight.
Yeah, and so somebody they were like, well, Jared's not getting the question, so somebody was like, we'll ask JR a question, and the question was, would you ever consider going on Dancing with the Stars?
Would you?
That's the
Would you look at
question.
that?
That's the question. And I had heard of the show. I was familiar with it, but it never crossed my mind. And I was like, yeah, that'd be fun. I just kind of like, poo-pooed the question, right? Fast forward to 2011, early in the year 2011, all my children announced that they were going to cancel the show later that year. I'm getting all these messages, man, from people like, oh, man, we're sorry to hear. What are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? One person says, hey, man, whatever happened with that dancing thing? And I was like, why does that keep coming up? So instead of ignoring that, because that's what we tend to do, I leaned in and I went and asked the executive producer on my show. I said, hey, just question. People keep mentioning this. What are your thoughts? And she was like, oh my God, you'd be great on that show. Let me make an introduction. She makes an introduction. I get asked to be part of season 13 of Dancing with the Stars. Now, I get asked, I think they were like, man, we like this kid. Because I was still a kid. We like this kid. Well, I mean, I guess I wasn't a kid. I was 20. What was I, 27, 28? I don't know. But, you know, there's a story as a personality. This will be good TV. Maybe you might go home week 3, week 4, but if it was a feel good thing. What they didn't realize, and this is something I tell people, is like when you're raised by a single woman, you have no other choice but to be her dance partner. So let me tell you something, boy, your boy could get down.
Dude,
And so,
I saw, man. Like you got some moves, dude. Wow.
dude, and here's the thing, that show, all the work that I had done prior to being on that show allowed me to take full advantage of being on that show,
Yeah.
allowed me to show my true DNA. Like I went on that show, and it's as if I was that 6-year old kid again at that bar in Louisiana, singing and dancing in front of people, entertaining people. I was that kid again, but that's who I was always capable of being. And I just had to do the work. So when the opportunity presented itself, I didn't screw it up. I didn't come across as like an angry, bitter, kid that has been through some trauma. And then now people are going to be like, well, that's what veterans normally, yeah, that's how they normally sound. That's what they normally, how they normally act, how they normally respond. No, I was able to show up and be like, listen, like, this is who I am. This is what I'm capable of. This is who I represent. And I was able to win that freaking competition, dude. Like I went up against a Kardashian. Do you know
Yes.
how hard that is? Like to freaking get more votes than a Card. I mean, granted, I get it. Poor Rob, it was the brother, but still, it's a Kardashian, right? And so it's been an incredible journey, man. Like, I mean, I had some incredible opportunities after that. I mean, I've started speaking all over the world. I wrote a book. Um, I
And it hit the New
continued,
York Times.
and it hit the New York Times, man. Just really blessed. And you know, but then it got to a point where I was like, okay, what else? Right? And not that I'm always looking for, like, I can't appreciate this moment because I'm too busy looking at what's next. No, I appreciate it, but then I was like, okay, like what else am I gonna do? Because this is what happened, and this is the trap that I fell into. I was making a lot of money, man. I was making a lot of money. I was getting a lot of love from people in the industry from regards to like how good I was and how easy I was to work with, just all the positive things. The problem is when I got into this work, Larry, I didn't get into this because I wanted to make a lot of money. I didn't get into this for the attention. I got into it because I felt like I had something to share with people. And that's the reason I got into this space. But when the money started coming in, when the attention started coming in, unfortunately, I lost my purpose and I started chasing more money and I started chasing more of the attention and the accolades. And you know what life did? Life said, all right, sucker, we're going to take it away from you. And they took it away from me. And about 3 years after I was on dancing, or 4 years I was on dancing, I found myself now getting no emails, no calls, no offers, really no money coming in. And I'm like, oh no, I'm struggling. Like this is getting real. Like because I spent so much of my money taking care of like, people, and I bought my mom a house. Well, great. I took care of all her bills and I started taking care of like I did a lot. I had a kid with my wife, and I realized as much as I spent all this time and energy talking to my agents and like, well, what do I need to do differently? What needs to change? What? And I started going to the park, man. I started going to the park during the day with my black lab. And I would sit at the park for hours. I would write. I would just sit there with him. I'd play catch with him. We'd probably jump in the creek and go for a little swim. And what I realized is that I spent all this time and energy looking outward for answers when the answers was right here in me. And what I discovered was, wait a minute, I got away from the reason I even got into this work. And so I had to like get back to my core, get back to who I was. And once I started to operate from that place, opportunities presented themselves again. And so now I'm very careful, my friend. I'm very careful not to get sucked into that trap again of like just pursuing the money and just pursuing the attention. If I focus on just doing it from my heart, all those things will come. all those things will present themselves. But I got to be willing to show up and do it from the reason that I love to do it. I'll tell you this, just to, so in therapy, I had to learn because I've gone to therapy a few times. I've done the traditional, I've done the untraditional, I've done, it's important to me. Talk to my boy a lot. He's my therapist as well. And he's honest with me because he knows me, he loves me.
Is this your best friend who's 17 years older
Yeah,
than
it's
you?
my best. Yep,
Yeah.
this is Dan. Yep, this
Okay.
is Dan, 17 years older than me. He's like a
Can,
dad, man.
can,
Like,
can I ask you about that real quick? So
yeah, of
this guy,
course.
I've heard you talk about him. Bet you reference him as your best friend, 17 years older than you. Um, was this a friendship that came after? Because the story I'm telling myself, JR, is he's also a mentor to you. Is that pretty
Yeah,
accurate?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So
100%.
did the mentorship come before like the good friendship, or was the friendship there and then it's somebody who's just always kind of shot you straight?
You know what's interesting is that when I left Hope, Arkansas, when I moved away my senior year, I moved away and I just kind of I was like, I'm never coming back to this place. And I went back for the first time in 2019, I want to say, um, which was like 18 years after I had left. And when I went back, I saw people, I connected with people, and I realized, wait a minute, there's a lot of people that cared about me there. And what I identified was I was not in the space to be able to see that. Yes, there were some challenges, not dismissing that, but I was not in the place to truly see that there were people in that community that loved me and cared about me and wanted the best for me. Okay. So the reason I share that too is because with Dan, we met, hell, 5, 6 months after I was in. No. I'm sorry. No. We met a year and a half, almost a year and a half after I was injured. And, it was a natural friendship, and then he was in the Air Force and then he got out of the Air Force. And then I asked him to come and work with this nonprofit that I was working with, helping veterans. And he did. And, we were still friends and then we were colleagues, coworkers, whatever. And that was the extent of it. The thing was, though, Dan would always tell me he loved me. And I thought that was so odd, man. I'm like, dude, like, and so I didn't know how to respond to that because I've never heard a man say, I love you. And so I would always just be like, all right, cool. I'll talk to you later. See you later. All right. All right. And he'd always say, I love you. I love you. Love you. And when I was really in my weakest point, my worst point in my life where listen, I'm glad you asked because now I can actually touch on this. When I got out of the Army at 22 years old in 2006, I got into society and it was a struggle. And for a couple of years, I was an unpleasant kid to be around, to be honest. I was drinking. I was just angry. And one day we're traveling for a fundraiser for this nonprofit. And there's a comment made in the car with somebody else. Nothing malicious. Nobody's really being, but I just made a snarky remark and Dan told me to chill out. And I didn't want to hear that. So then I told him to pull the car over. I was going to fight him. So he pulls the car over and I get out and we're going to duke it out, dude.
Is he the same guy who's 280?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're going to duke it out, man, on the side of the road. And at this point, I'm just so mad, dude. So mad. Just life. Just life. Not
Yeah,
even
man.
him. Just life. And this was going to be my moment to get it all out. And he didn't fight me, but he got back in the car. I got back in the car. We go to the hotel. We pull up to the hotel. Everyone gets out of the car except for him. And then he says, hey, JR, hey, man, get in the car. And I was like, okay. So I get in the car. And this is like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning
Yeah.
in Indianapolis. I don't even know where, but We're in the parking lot of the hotel, and he says, "Man, you need to cry. It's okay. You can cry." And I was like, "The hell are you talking about?" He says, "Man, you haven't healed emotionally or mentally." He's like, "Just cry, cry, cry." And I just started crying. Dude, everything just started flooding out of me. Like I was just all coming out. And that was the first time I'd heard the word, I understood the definition of the word, but I never felt it. And that was the first time I felt truly like I was being vulnerable and that I wasn't judged for it, that I was being listened to and I was being supported by him. And it was so powerful that when we ended that conversation, I looked at him and I told him I loved him. I was the first one to say, "I love you, man." And now here we are, 20 years later, man, every time we talk, I mean, we talk almost daily. Every time we talk, like I could call him for like a 2 minute conversation just to ask him a quick question. But we hang up. "Hey, love you. Love you too, man." And then I'd be like, "Oh shit, I forgot to ask him this other thing." I'll call him right back. "Hey, Dan, blah, blah, blah. This and this. Okay, cool. Love you. Love you too, man." Right? It's just like, and for me, that was such a pivotal turning point in my life because it allowed me to understand that I could be vulnerable and that it wasn't going to be used against me. And I could show that part of me. And that's what I started doing, man. It's just leaning into that. And it was such a pivotal turning point in my life. And that's why he still is my guy. He's everything in my life. He's my best friend. He is my mentor. He is the godfather to my children. He's grandfather Dan, Uncle Dan. I mean, he's just an incredible human being that it was so easy for him to be like, "Yo, this kid is in a bad space. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
man.
stay away from this." He leaned in, and that's taught me that I need to continue to find ways to lean into.
And you said he was part of the Air Force.
Yeah, he was in the Air Force,
So is
so
he
I talk
Lieutenant
shit
Dan
to him
too?
every now.
Come on, man. It's a dad joke, right?
I like
Man.
that.
Dude, I
I
thought you were
like
gonna
that.
roll. I thought you were gonna fall off your chair just now laughing. Oh my gosh, I didn't expect that. But it's.
That was good.
I want you to share this, Jr.
Hmm.
I think every dude. I mean, I'm lucky doing this work that we've got a whole community of men who are just like Dan's to each other, right? Like we
Hmm.
in what we call Dad Edge Alliance, and I'm lucky to do life with a lot of great men. But I'll tell you, man, there's not a lot of dudes out there that have community like Dad Edge. There's not a lot of dudes out there that have a best friend named Dan who's got their
Yep.
best interest at heart. That's a real gap for dudes, right? And
Yeah.
I want you to talk to that, man, just a little bit because like men, the majority of men, we've got like these sort of high level surface acquaintances. We work together, or maybe I see you at the kids' practice,
Yeah.
maybe I coach your daughter in softball that I don't want to really coach anymore, but then I get a God wink, I'm going to coach again. Like, yeah, I know you, man. I see you. I
Yeah.
see you. Come on, JR. But,
Somebody has done their research.
I have, man. But, I think that there's definitely a lot of men out there that don't have that. And we think like we don't really need it. And I think it's one of those things that you don't realize like you know, think about all the moments you've had, all the conversations you've had with Dan, all these different things that have happened that probably in your life because of Dan. And there are so
Yeah.
many men out there that don't have that. And I would
Yeah.
just love for you to shine a light as big as bright as you can on why men do need that.
Oh my God. I mean, in my opinion, it's what's going to help us really reach our full potential. Um, in my opinion, it's what's going to allow us to truly feel love, be okay with that feeling of love, and to be able to then express that love to the people we love. Um, my relationship with Dan and the way that he's challenged me as a human being, as a man, as a father, as a husband. I'm a better husband. I'm a better father. I identify there's things that, ooh, I got to work on this. But Dan's like, hey, man. And I'm like, I can't continue that trend. Let me figure out ways that I can work on this so that way I don't repeat that same thing. Um, it's vital to allowing us to become who we were destined to be, which are protectors, but also people that equally want to feel loved, want to give love. And I think when people say, well, we don't have that, and I'm not just going to go on a podcast and talk about all these things. That's not where it starts. Like, I think, again, you got to be willing to like lean in and listen. And I guarantee you, there's some people in your circle that are down to like talk. And nobody says, it's not one of those scenarios where it's like, we like vulnerability. We want to encourage people to be vulnerable. But at the same time, we don't want people to start dumping everything on us, like trauma dumping on us, right? And so it's like, you just sort of like throw out a couple things. Like, was next time somebody asks you how you're doing, that's an opportunity. You can say, oh, man, struggling. Like navigating this, navigating that, whatever. Yeah, that person might be like, okay, good luck with that. I gotta go. But that's not necessarily a reflection on you. That's a reflection on them, that they're not emotionally in the space to be able to show up and be there for you. That's truly what it is, that they're just not there. But does that mean that you should stop practicing this? Absolutely not. It just means the next time you interact with somebody else, guess when that person's like, yo, man, how you doing? Man, you know what, man, I'm struggling right now. Like, I feel this, I'm frustrated, blah, 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 kind of lost right now. Now that person emotionally is in a different place. That person be like, man, I'm going through the same thing. Or, man, I was going through that not too long ago. Man, let's talk about it. Now you've created a connection with somebody. But I think the key is, because I could have easily dismissed Dan. I could have easily dismissed him. I could have, dude. There's so many conversations that I've had with people since I've had Dan in my life that are just strangers. But I've been open to the possibility and to the conversation that it's led to some beautiful connections and people sharing some beautiful wisdom with me and things that still live with me till this day. And so you got to practice it. You got to listen. I now have it in my life where when I need to talk to somebody, when there's some things on my mind, on my heart, I know who I can call. I know a couple people that I can reach out to that will show up for me in that way. When I want to have fun, when I want to clown, I know who I can call. And so you just identify. It's no different than like in the military. Everybody has their role. And like, you specialize in this, you specialize in that. Doesn't mean you're not capable of one day specializing in this. But right now, where we all are, with the information that we have, where we are as individuals, this is what you specialize in. And this is what I know the value you bring to me. So what it does, it prevents me going to one person, hoping one person is going to fix everything. Instead, I can go to Larry and be like, hey, I know Larry can help me through this. But then I equally know I can go to somebody else that can help me through another component. And so, listen, I think, again, as I said, we all want to be part of a community. We all want to feel like we matter. We all want to feel like we're loved. We all want to feel like we're heard. And the only true way that you get that is you have to be willing to lean in a little bit. And there's going to be some people you might turn off. There's going to be some people you're going to lose. And you got to understand that those people aren't meant to be in your life right now. And that's okay.
I agree with you, man. And I even love I really love the viewpoint of, just, I've got my clowning friends, that's fine. Right. I mean, like, I still have my college buddies, like, and yep. they're great for that. Right.
Yeah.
And then you have you've got the ones who are on speed dial, right? The ones yep. like, and you pick those ones. I saw this quote on social media and I was like, man, that is so true. But a man, and I'm going to butcher this because I don't remember all the men, but like, I think it was like, there's three, every guy needs three guys. One is my vault. Like, I can yep. tell, like, any secret, you know, that I have, like this person won't tell it, like they'll vault it like that, and they don't judge me for it, right? Then there's the advisor, right? Which I think like Dan is a great one for you. It's like, hey, like when just somebody who's just a little ahead of you, either in life or experience or something, like, hey, this is going on, like, can you help me out, right? And then there is the ride or die friend. This is the guy
Yeah.
that, like, no matter how much time goes by in your life, you know, you can call him, right?
Yep.
You know, he's the guy that you'll probably know until you hit the deathbed. So,
Yep.
but you know, as you wrap this up, I mean, obviously, since this is a dad show, I mean, I know you have your son, you have your daughter, uh, you're married. I would love for you to just, and I know your marriage was quite a journey as well.
Yeah.
Like, and it kind of
Yep.
like hit some tumultuous waves and that kind of thing.
Yep.
And then, but I would love for you to just share any advice that you have around, you know, fatherhood and marriage.
Yeah, man. So from a relationship standpoint, my marriage, you know, we split up when our daughter was a year old,
Right.
and we weren't together, and we didn't get back together until she was 4. But in those 3 years that we weren't together, she did some of her work, I did some of my work individually, and then we were able to collectively, excuse me, collectively, you know, come together and and grow our family and be together. But one of the things I identified is that one, I'm a solution based individual, like focused individual. So she would come to me and share something, and I would immediately be like, okay, here's how you fix it. Okay, cool, go execute. Right? I'm executing things right now. And what I had to learn is one, that wasn't my role. I didn't need to do that. She was, in many cases, very capable of doing it herself. She just needed me to listen. She just needed me to be there and show up, right? And just be a sounding board for her.
So wait,
So I needed to learn.
she didn't want you to
Yeah.
fix her problems? Are you serious? Come on,
No,
man.
no,
All this
no,
wisdom that we
no,
have as dudes and just bestow them upon
no,
the ladies, doesn't work out
no.
so well, does it?
There is a time and place for that, my friend. There is
There
a
is.
time and place for that. And so I had to learn how to equally be vulnerable with her.
Yeah.
I had to, like even, dude, even recently, there was something where I was like traveling a lot and I got home late and I was gonna get up with our daughter to take her to school. And she's like, hey, let me help you. It's okay. I can help you. That's still something that I still, navigate with her. And that was very real, that I was just like, I got it. I do it. No, y'all need you to help me. And so I had to learn how to like lean in to be like, hey, this is my team member. If I'm going to look
Yeah.
at this like as like from a military standpoint, and you have a team, like you had to trust that team member. And this is my team member.
Yeah.
And so I have to give her some responsibility and I have to trust that she's going to execute and she's got my back. And that's what I started doing, man. It's just like, cool, this is what it is. Let's go. And leaning into that. And so it's now that I've done that, we're connected on a different level, man. Like like we don't take things personal. Like we understand where we're coming from. It's not that deep. Now, from a father standpoint, I think the biggest thing, because my daughter's 12, my son's 3, so my son's still young, but my daughter, as a 12-year-old, she's taught me a lot. One,
I
I had to
bet.
learn how to listen,
Yeah. There's
truly listen.
there's a theme going on here with
Yeah.
females and listening. I don't know what it is.
hmm hmm
Yeah, man.
Yes, there is, my friend. You get a lot further when you spend a little bit more time listening instead of
Yeah.
talking. Trust me, I
So
know.
true.
From a parenting standpoint, as I was saying, my daughter's 12, my son's 3, so he's still young, but my daughter has taught me a lot. I've spent a lot of time listening. Um, I've gone to my daughter and have apologized to my daughter because I said something or I did something. I've gone to my daughter and I've said, I don't have all the answers. I've gone to my daughter and I said, I'm wrong. Um, I've gone to my daughter and done all those things. And that level of vulnerability, like my daughter knows that I got her. And any moment she needs me, I got her. She knows that about me. But she also knows that if she needs to come and talk and share something, that I equally emotionally can have the emotional intelligence to show up for her in that way. And and it's made our relationship like so much stronger because of that. Dude, I was guilting my daughter. I was doing the same thing that I learned as a child with my mother. I was doing it to my daughter. I would guilt her because she said something that triggered me. And she didn't intentionally do it. She was just speaking from what she believed or what she remembers or what she felt. And yet I made her feel crappy about it. And then I realized that's not right. I got to break that pattern. I got to break that. And so I think, as much as we get caught up in this trap that we're the parents and we're the ones that have all this life and knowledge, and we do, but our kids can teach us a lot.
Oh my gosh.
Because as
Yeah.
we progress to adults and we gather all this information, we have all the information, but sometimes we don't necessarily have that very innocent, pure way of applying it. And kids come into the equation and help you understand how to apply and what to do with that knowledge. And the biggest thing is like, as a parent, it's allowing your kids to be who they're destined to be and not who you think they should be. And that's a hard thing to do because we all think we know what's best for each other. And in some cases, that's true. In other cases, you just got to let your kids go and just be there and love them and support them and say, I got you. I got you. I'm here for you. No matter what, you go do it. I got you. And so, so that's just, I think for me, I just spent a lot of time listening to my kids. I spent a lot of time sharing with my kids. I spent a lot of time just being present with my kids. And, I'm the one that gets the reward, to be honest.
I love
I
that, man.
know, I know they do. And I know they'll share that with me when they're older. But right now, I'm the one that gets the benefit. I truly do.
I've heard you talk on Ryan's show about you being a pattern breaker, and I love that term.
Yeah.
I've used that term myself because you and I, like I said, you and I were raised very similarly and had very similar experiences. And when you, I think, come from that background, you're gonna do one or two things. You're either gonna give that, or you're going to break it.
Yep.
And what I've heard too is that if you're a pattern breaker, I honestly think, JR, and I'm not trying to shine a light on like, oh, well, you and I are just awesome. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is,
Why not?
well, you might be. I need a lot of help. But
So do I, my friend.
I will say this. I don't think I heard this other quote said to me too. And I never thought of it this way until I heard it. And I was like, I think there might be a lot of truth to that. I don't think your family probably fully understands the magnitude and the weight that carries. Like,
Yeah.
because I don't know about you, but I go to battle with myself every damn day, every day. And it's a default of like, talking myself out, basically getting out of my own way, because like my default is to, when something happens, to revert to the thing, the actual thing I don't want to do. Right. And luckily though, doing this work, like I've learned some of these, and I'm not saying every day's perfect. Like even yesterday, oh my God, what I had like my 16-year-old was older than me yesterday. Like I was an idiot as a dad.
Oh, that
yesterday.
happens.
I have to go repair and apologize to these people today. But I will say this. My batting average is pretty good, but it's constant, high alert, getting out of my own way, like, and learning these things. And I think when you're a pattern breaker, that's the battle that we face, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%, man. 100%. I think, that's the thing is I'm most proud of, is being that, I call it a cycle breaker, but that's the biggest thing that I'm most proud of, is being that cycle breaker.
Yeah.
But I think to your point is like being able to say, like you said, my 16-year-old, like yesterday he was, was the adult, right? Like, and it's like, there's going to be those days, there's going to be those moments. And But what you're going to do now is go to your kid and say, hey, listen, my bad. I could have handled this differently. I should have handled this better next time. This is what I'm going to be focused on, et cetera. And you don't realize what that does for a kid. It teaches them to say it's okay to say, I messed up. I was wrong. I apologize. And I think that's another thing my wife has taught me, man, is like, I was kind of the dude that when people apologize to me, oh, dude, I still kept my hands on the throat. Like I was still like, nah, 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 I'm not going to forget. And I was still angry. And my wife is like, listen, it takes a lot for people to apologize. And you got to be able to learn how to just receive that. Like you got to identify, it takes a lot for people to get to that point. And if they do it, just receive it and let it go. Just move on. Why you hold on to that energy? And I'm like, that is so true.
So true.
And so, like, I go to my kids, I apologize. My kids come to me, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm still mad at you, ass because, like what you did and what you said or whatever, how you acted. But you know what? We'll move on.
Yeah, we'll move on.
I feel like I've taught my daughter to have like emotional intelligence. I've taught my daughter to like how to be able to read a room. I've taught her how to be able to understand like, okay, maybe this isn't the right time for this because I'm always having these conversations with her. Always having these conversations with her. And so, yeah, man, I mean, listen, I love this parenting thing, man. It's so freaking awesome. And, you know, to your point about like, there's some people that continue the patterns and others that don't. And you and I have clearly gone in the opposite direction. But at the end of the day, like when, you hear people that say, well, that's just what my parents did, or that's what, and I'm like, well, did you like it? Did you like it? You
How's that
didn't like
working?
it. So what?
Or Dr.
So,
Phil,
so
how's that
what?
working out for you?
Yeah. So what? Why the hell are you
Right?
still
Yeah.
doing it to everybody? You didn't like it, so what makes you think they like it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's for me, it was a matter of like at some point you got to be willing to do something completely different, and um, that's what it really comes down to. And you didn't like it, so why do you think your kid's gonna like it? Think about what you would have loved to have. Think about what you would have loved to feel. Think about what you would have loved to hear. Maybe try doing those things, and you might get a different outcome. Possibly. But what do I know? I'm
What do you
still a
know?
dad.
Yeah.
I'm still just a dad. You know what? I don't know if I'm my batting average 300. I might be in the 250 range right now, but I tell people like I practice positivity daily.
Yeah.
Just because I've had success, and I don't mean success like from a monetary or accolade. I mean success from a standpoint of like just being healthy and creating a great life for myself. Like I still have to make a choice and practice it every single freaking day. You got to
It's
show
all,
up.
it's a practice, man. Just like this whole
Yeah,
thing. Well,
100%.
well, dude, I have thoroughly enjoyed this. I want to make sure we point the guys to the best way to contact you, which from what I understand, it's Instagram, but I also know you have a
Yeah,
website and all that good stuff. But where's the best
yeah,
place for guys to find you?
yeah. Listen, if they want to do a deeper dive, you can always go to my website, jrmartinez.com. Otherwise, hit me up on social. I mean, I'd love to, when this episode comes out, I'd love for people to come on to social and share what they thought, if there was any takeaways or any other further questions that they may have that I didn't touch on here. I'd love to hear from people. So my handle is I am JR Martinez. So, just I love connecting with people, man. I love chatting. I just want to say to you, thanks for creating the platform, and thanks for sharing, your audience with me, man, or sharing me with your audience. And so, just really appreciate it. It was a fun conversation, man.
I thoroughly enjoyed it as well. And what I want you guys to do is we're going to have all these links in the show notes for you. We'll have JR's website as well as his Instagram. I am JR Martinez. But do me a favor, do him a favor. If whatever it is you got out of this show, shoot him a DM. Let him know.
Yeah.
Let him know. So, JR, I really appreciate you coming on today. I was super excited. As you know, I was kind of giddy. I was like, I've done a lot of homework on you, so I was like, I'm really excited
Yeah,
about this
you did.
conversation. But I really enjoyed it, man. Thank you for coming on today.
Hey, appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for creating the platform, like I said. And thank you for equally being a cycle breaker, man. And go look in the mirror and practice. I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, no, that didn't sound right. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, no, that didn't sound right.
Yeah.
Okay, my bad. Like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Go work on that and go have that conversation, man.
Well, it's kind of like from Nutty Professor. I love when Eddie
Yeah.
Murphy was like, I'm sorry. I want the world to know I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Why?
Why?
JR, I don't know who had more fun on this show, me or you, but we're both
Oh
laughing.
man,
Like,
this is what I needed, baby. This is what I needed. This is what I needed. Oh, I love laughter, man.
oh, same here,
Awesome,
brother.
brother. Well, thank you so much, man, and look forward to to seeing the episode and staying connected, man, and keep doing the great work, brother. Happy holidays to you and your family.
Back at you, brother. Thank you.